What's up, YouTube? So I'd like to address some comment that was made for our first video that we just did recently, which is the video on biblical faith. And so there was this guy, Grumpy Librarian, who actually mentions a passage that we totally should have brought up in the video, but that's my mistake. I forgot to include it. And that's John 20, verse 29. Okay. This passage is frequently used as evidence as to why biblical faith is blind, totally blind. And what it's talking about is, well, the disciple Thomas he's called Doubting Thomas because he doesn't actually see Jesus the first time that the disciples all see him. And then when they come to tell him, hey, we saw Jesus after his crucifixion. He rose from the dead. Thomas says, no, you didn't see him. I won't believe it until I actually see the holes in his hands and in his side. You know, his obvious signs of fatal wounds. Unless I see that, I won't believe it, right? And so Jesus appears to him, and then Thomas is blown away. He actually says in John 20, verse 28, my Lord and my God, which is amazing. He actually calls Jesus God right there. Notice how Jesus does not rebuke him for this, clearly accepting his divinity. But then verse 29, it says, Jesus said to him, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Okay, so without looking at any context, this clearly does seem to say that it's better for you to not see and believe. Quite literally, it's better for you to believe me, but it be blind, right? Well, hold on. Let's think of the context a little bit. Does Thomas have any good reason to believe that Jesus may have risen from the dead outside of him actually feeling his hands and his side? Did he already have evidence? Yes. First of all, the other 10 disciples who were still there in the upper room, they just said, we saw him. He appeared in the upper room and talked to us, and we hugged him and held him and all this stuff. Right there, that's some interesting, extremely compelling data that Thomas already rejected. Okay. Also, before Jesus died, earlier in his ministry, he told the disciples, look, I'm going to be crucified. The chief priests, I'll be handed over to the chief priests and the elders of Israel, the Sanhedrin, and they will kill me. And then I will rise again. You know, he even talked about the sign of Jonah, where he's saying, I will be in the earth for 3 days and 3 nights, as Jonah was in a whale or a fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And then I will rise again, right? So he talked about this so many times. So for Thomas to still not believe it would be kind of ridiculous at this point. Thomas is being led by his doubt rather than by who he understands Jesus to be, his faith, right? But basically, what I'm saying is Thomas had all of the reasons to believe, all of the evidence to believe that Jesus actually did bodily rise from the dead. He just doubted all of them. And so that's why he's saying, you shouldn't have even seen me, and you should have believed. That's what Jesus is saying to him. So this is actually not evidence that absolute blind faith is biblical. Now, another passage that was brought up was actually Hebrews chapter 11, and it was starting in verse 1. And, well, it was actually in verse 3. And you know, we actually addressed this in the video, but let me just go to it one more time while I'm here. So the writer of Hebrews here says, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. Okay. Now, what is faith? Faith is believing something where you don't have absolute evidence. You don't have absolute reason to believe it. That would be Cartesian certainty. That's something that very few things in life that we actually have. We almost never have Cartesian certainty. So what faith really is it's saying, okay, I have enough reasons. Now I can jump the gap in uncertainty and believe. That's what that is. And so here we know that the writer of Hebrews is not saying that faith is something that is 100% blind. He's saying that it's partially blind. So if you go to verse 17, and we talked about this in the video already, but it gave an indication that because Abraham knew God in his power already, he was able to believe that God would raise Isaac from the dead after Abraham offered him up, okay, as an offering, which God asked him to do. That evidence was already there. Why? Because Abraham's 90-year-old wife was able to give birth to a son in the first place. A miracle had already happened. And even before that, there was evidence of God moving in Abraham's life. So based on that, he was able to then make the jump. Okay, God is probably able to raise my son from the dead also. Same thing here. If we know God, like in Abraham's case, he knows that God is speaking to him several occasions and then makes his wife give birth when she's 90 years old. Okay, if God also tells me, by the way, Abraham, I created the universe and this is how it happened, Abraham has every right to believe him. God has already proven himself to be powerful, to have power over the laws of nature. Should you not believe him when he tells you how he created the universe? Right? So that all lines up. So nowhere in Hebrews 11 or in John 20 do we see evidence that biblical faith is actually blind. We see that biblical faith does involve crossing a gap, so to speak, because we don't have Cartesian certainty. But the gap is not absolute. It is not 100%. We don't believe things just because we want to believe them. There is good reason to believe them. You know, it's just like the same reason why you will trust your doctor when your doctor gives you some advice. You don't know with Cartesian certainty whether that advice is good because you have certain details of your own body that the doctor may not know about. But because the doctor has his degree on the wall and because he has a history of helping you out well, you decide to trust your doctor. In the same instance, you don't have Cartesian certainty, but you know your doctor, and so you're able to put your faith in your doctor and trust them when they give you advice or direction on how to be healthy. So there you go. I think that's about it. There's really no place in the Bible where you can find evidence that biblical faith is blind faith. And for all the skeptics out there, you use faith in everyday decisions. And so we're not doing anything that's unreasonable as Christians when we say that faith is necessary to understand that the worlds were made by what was unseen, by God himself. So, thanks for watching.